Good afternoon, Urban Leaguers. I want you to give those Women of Power honorees another big round of applause. It was so powerful to be with Ella Teal and CCH Pounder and all of the Urban League phenomenal women, AOE presidents and National Urban League trustees. Give them another big round of applause. I was so pleased with just the progress that we've made when it comes to women empowerment in the Urban League movement. Good afternoon, and I want to let you know that I have the pleasure of presiding over today's plenary session. Before we begin, I want to offer a few thoughts, then I'm going to introduce Richard Mark, Chairman and President of Ameren, Illinois. This session showcases the Urban League's Main Street Marshall Plan. We talked about it last night in the State of the Urban League address. We introduced it as a concept at our State of Black America in 2016. We refined it, added flesh to it, and reintroduced it as a comprehensive plan at State of Black America 2017. What you have in the green booklets is an executive summary of what indeed is a 50-page report, a 50-page set of recommendations. This Main Street Marshall Plan answers the discussion in America about the need to upgrade our infrastructure. We have heard people on the left, in the middle, on the right, talk about the need for infrastructure. Some people have released one-page documents. Other people have given statements and talking points about it. Let the record show that the Urban League has a comprehensive plan. And that plan, ladies and gentlemen, calls for a $4 trillion commitment over a 10-year period. $2 trillion for physical infrastructure. That's roads, bridges, water systems. But we think it should not stop there. We think that the Main Street Marshall Plan, when it comes to our physical infrastructure, has to go further. It has to include community facilities like schools, community centers, and health centers. It has to also include things like the electric grid and broadband. We have an opportunity and a need to rebuild the physical infrastructure of the nation. It is something that those of us that are committed to civil rights, social and economic justice have to speak to. Economic policy is our business. Economic policy is civil rights in the 21st century. Let us not let anyone suggest that our voice should not be heard on these issues. This plan also calls for a $2 trillion commitment to what we like to call human infrastructure. That is, that we need to invest even more substantially in educating our children, all the way from preschool, all the way through postgraduate school. That we need to invest in upgrading our workforce, in workforce development, in job training, in education, in credentialing, in community college. We also need to upgrade our investment in higher education because the jobs of tomorrow are going to require more education, not less education, more qualifications, not less qualifications. More people and more jobs are going to be needing degrees in the 21st century economy. So we're going to have a discussion and a frame about that plan here today and a discussion about what it entails. Here is what I hope you take away. When it comes to the civil rights community, the National Urban League stands for economic empowerment. And we're going to talk substantively about the issues of infrastructure, tax reform, fiscal issues that affect each and every one of us, affect our pocketbooks, affect the investments that go into our communities, and affect the investments that go into our affiliates. So we're going to have a great discussion. And before we begin, please join me in welcoming Richard J. Mark. Richard J. Mark is Chairman and President of Ameren, Illinois. That's an electric and gas utility. Let's give Richard a warm round of applause. Richard J. Mark.
Thank you, Mark. Good afternoon. You know, I want to share with you a little bit about Ameren Corporation and about the electric and gas industry's impact on jobs, education, and our economy. Ameren Corporation is a $14 billion Fortune 500 company headquartered just a few blocks from here in St. Louis, Missouri. We're the largest regulated electric utility in the state of Missouri and the largest combination utility in the state of Illinois. We have electric and natural gas in the state of Illinois. Our service territories represent over 64,000 square miles in those two states, and we have approximately 8,500 employees. You know, today's session, as Mark said, is focused on the Main Street Marshall Plan and how we drive economic recovery for our urban communities and for working class Americans. So you're probably wondering how a utility can help contribute to this solution. In many utilities that we serve across Ameren, Illinois, and Missouri, the utility is often the largest employer. The electric power industry overall supports more than 7 million jobs with annual wages of $73,000 per year. Today, the electric industry, as Mark talked about investing in infrastructure, is investing on average $100 billion per year to build a smarter, more resilient energy infrastructure for the future. So I'm glad to be given an opportunity to give you a few remarks on what the industry, supported by the Edison Electrical Institution, which is the largest association that represents all electric utilities across the country, and Ameren is doing to promote jobs and stimulate the economy. Ameren has a long-standing partnership with the St. Louis Urban League, and we've worked closely with its president and CEO, Mike McMillan, on a number of collaborative projects. In fact, just yesterday, we were at the ribbon cutting for the Ferguson Community Empowerment Center, which is one of the many collaborations that we have with the Urban League. But one of the keys to economic recovery is education. And so at Ameren, what we've tried to do is provide opportunities for our co-op students and interns each and every summer to come to Ameren and learn more about jobs and opportunities that are available to them. This year, we've sponsored over 170 co-ops and interns for our summer program. We offer scholarships to minority students and collaborate with local universities and community colleges to offer classes to help prepare young people for jobs and opportunities in the utility business. We also sponsor a number of STEM programs for local middle schools and high schools throughout both Illinois and Missouri. Another key to economic recovery for urban communities is helping build minority and women-owned businesses. And with the help of EEI, Edison Electrical Institute, which has been working to build minority businesses for the last 34 years, we've developed a program to give opportunities and create jobs to bring more minority businesses to do work in the electric utility business industry. So some of the things that we do is provide annual scholarships for diverse suppliers to attend entrepreneurial programs, one of which we sponsor is at Dartmouth University. And this program provides opportunities for business leaders to get information on and to learn about financial growth, contract negotiations, marketing operations, as well as building their business plan and leadership. These programs and initiatives are a good start, but we know there's a lot more that should be done. And that's why we're all here today. So in 1964, Whitney Young, who was the executive director of the National Urban League at that time, called for a domestic Marshall Plan. President Lyndon Johnson included parts of that domestic plan in his War on Poverty. At President Johnson's commencement speech a few months later at Howard University, he said, "It's not enough just to open the gates of opportunity. All of our citizens must have the ability to walk through those gates." And that's why we're all here today, to ensure that all of our youth have the opportunity to walk through those gates. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Another warm round of applause for Richard. I am so proud to welcome at this time A.C. Wharton Jr. For 15 years, A.C. was mayor of both the city of Memphis and Shelby County and serves as an executive advisor for St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. He's a lawyer by profession, and he served in many, many leadership roles, including Director of Memphis Area Legal Services, Chief Public Defender in Shelby County, and Mayor, of course, of Shelby County and the City of Memphis. He is the longest-serving board member of the Tennessee Higher Ed Commission, as well as Chairman of the Board of Methodist Healthcare. Ladies and gentlemen, I am proud to welcome to the stage to speak on behalf of St. Jude's Children's Hospital, Mayor A.C. Wharton, Jr.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mayor Morial, my friend of long standing. Welcome to all of you, and thanks to you for seeing fit to come and listen to what I feel to be one of the most burning and most critical topics we in America must face. I bring you greetings from St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, which, although it's located in Memphis, Tennessee, it is not a Memphis hospital. It is a hospital for all the children who suffer from cancer wherever they may be. Our doors are open to you. I can think of no more appropriate topic for this convention and for all of us in the years to come than a Marshall Plan to save our cities. It's so appropriate, it caused me to reflect on what was said by former Secretary of State George Marshall when he introduced the original Marshall Plan. He stated that our policy is not directed against any country, but against hunger, against poverty, against desperation, and chaos. Pause for a minute and fast forward to today. Too many of our American cities still face hunger, poverty, chaos, and desperation. Something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue. What a great theme for American cities today. At St. Jude Children's Hospital, we not only seek to cure cancers of the body, but by being a good corporate citizen, we also know that while curing cancer of the physical body is good and necessary, but the cancer of the spirit, which so many of our children face, must likewise be remedied. Not only do we seek to cure the body, but we're becoming really great citizens right in the middle of Memphis, Tennessee. And this is a hospital that could be located anywhere, could expand anywhere, but I hope you'll have a chance to visit there and see the $1.2 billion expansion, not on the outskirts of the city, but in a place where a housing project once stood, right in the middle of our city. So while we at St. Jude Children's Research Hospital have adopted the words of Danny Thomas, its founder, that no child should die in the dawn of life, as a former mayor, I think it behooves us all to adopt a similar slogan, not merely a slogan, but marching orders. They tell us that there's a recovery afoot in the United States of America, but unfortunately, that recovery, in too many instances, has not reached our cities. So just as we say at St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital that no child should die in the dawn of life, let us go forward in the belief that as this great recovery comes, that the dreams of no city should die in the dawn of that recovery. Thank you so much. God bless the Urban League, and thank you for your attention. Thank you. Good day.
Let's thank Mayor Wharton another time. Mayor A.C. Wharton, thank you, A.C. Before we begin our panel, it is my sincere honor to introduce the Reverend Al Sharpton, founder and president of the National Action Network and television talk show host on MSNBC's Politics Nation. He is internationally renowned as a civil rights leader and activist, and he's dedicated his life to the fight for justice and equality. For decades, he's turned the power of dissent and protest into tangible legislation impacting the lives of ordinary people. Former President Obama once stated, "Reverend Sharpton is a voice for the voiceless and a champion for the downtrodden." As head of the National Action Network, which currently operates over 125 chapters across the country, including a Washington, D.C. bureau and a headquarters in Harlem, Reverend Sharpton has taken the teachings of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and applied them to a modern civil rights agenda. He's been an advocate in a tireless fashion for everything from police reform and accountability to protection of voting rights and education equality. A 2017 Vanity Fair profile described him as arguably the country's most influential civil rights leader. And I would add that I am proud that the National Action Network and the National Urban League have had a long-standing relationship, as we have committed to ensuring that in these times, our generation of civil rights leaders will not allow crab-in-the-barrel, simplistic feuding and disputes over tactics get in the way of the idea and the driving force that we share a mission, and that mission is a nation united with liberty, justice, and economic opportunity for all. So, ladies and gentlemen, please greet my good friend, Reverend Al Sharpton.
Thank you, President Morial, and to all of the delegates and officers of the National Urban League. Let me say that I'm here to say unequivocally that the partnership and work that we do with National Urban League from National Action Network is not only continued to be bonded, but we are closer than ever during these times where civil rights and human rights are seriously jeopardized by what is going on in this country. People should not ignore that 3 years ago, when a young man was laying in the streets of Ferguson, and I came in to do the funeral and to help put together the first rallies, that the National Urban League turned the pain into power by going yesterday and showing that we not only can burn, we can build, and we can heal. And we ought to give a great hand to our brother and President Mark Morial for having the vision to come back where people wanted the story of Ferguson to end remembering disturbances. There's now a building there to show that we will build and rejuvenate, and what you've done is historic and something that all of us should salute. About 2 months ago, President Morial and I joined 3 of the other national civil rights organizations in meeting with the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions. At least he was still Attorney General when I walked out. I'll check my Twitter to see if he's still Attorney General. And one of the things that we have made clear, and we must make clear all over together, and that is that no matter what party is in power, civil rights, voting rights, health care, education, and financial literacy is not something that we look to from either of the major parties. We look for whoever is in power to respect the tenets of what has built this country. You cannot make America great without dealing with the great principles that was established from the beginning over a century ago with the National Urban League, and even in the height of the 60s with Dr. King, it was a Whitney Young. We have always operated together, and we cannot afford during these times of instability to not assure our people that the civil rights community is stabilized, is forward, is moving together, and there can be no sunlight between us. There are those forces that want to bring us back to the days of Jim Crow voting and Jim Crow housing, and in the corporate world try to wipe out diversity plans by saying that we no longer want to deal with the issue of race. We did not start America dealing with the issue of race. That has been an issue since America started. We are not the race problem. We're trying to solve the race problem. We are the solution to the problem. So whether it be Donald Trump, whether it be Barack Obama, we are the same, and we will continue to advocate the same. So I wanted to be here as the panel starts to say that our union, our bonding, our family membership together is needed more than ever, is threaded more than ever. We are together more than ever, and nobody will tweet us apart, nobody will talk us apart, nobody will pull us apart. We come this far together, and we're going all the way together. Thank you, and God bless you.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's get our discussion underway on the Main Street Marshall Plan. Let me turn it over to our moderator for Plenary 2, Main Street Marshall Plan for Urban America. He's a renowned journalist and producer who delivers headline makers and culturally relevant news to Bounce TV. Many of you know him from BET, and we all know him as an award-winning journalist. Ladies and gentlemen, Ed Gordon is known for engaging interaction and interviews with newsmakers from the world of politics, entertainment, and sports. He hosts Ed Gordon, a quarterly news magazine program seen on Bounce TV, and the syndicated radio program Weekend with Ed Gordon. Gordon is heard twice a week on the Steve Harvey Morning Show. Ladies and gentlemen, our moderator and my good friend, Ed Gordon.
Afternoon. Oh, y'all got to do better. I know it's a long day, but good afternoon. All right, thank you very much. Just quick ground rules, if you will, before we get started. We're going to get right into this because we're running a little behind. As you can see in the aisles, there are 2 microphones there. We will be taking Q&A from you. There are 2 things that I've learned in almost a quarter century of doing this. 1, I don't make many friends from this. 2, that's okay. I will ask you to get to the microphones early because inevitably we run out of time and you get mad at me because you didn't get your question in. Secondly, we would ask that you have a quick question or, not and or, but or comment. If it gets too long, it is my job today to cut you off. So if you take it personally, sorry. So again, and if it gets too deep, you know, don't stand there for an hour or so. Let the line kind of thin out before you get back in. We've got a great panel today, and we're going to get right into that Marshall Plan and then get to your questions and comments as quickly as possible. So let me, without further ado, introduce this panel to you. First, the Honorable Karen Freeman Wilson, Mayor of Gary, Indiana. In 2011, Freeman Wilson became the first woman to lead the Steel City of Gary and the first African-American female mayor in the state of Indiana. Her public service is long-standing. Please, ladies and gentlemen, welcome the Honorable Karen Freeman Wilson. Next, the Honorable Toni Harp, Mayor of New Haven, Connecticut. An abiding commitment to social justice steels her career in public service. Over her time, she has a reputation of the conscience of the Senate at her capital, and she is one of those who is resilient and life-affirming when moving forward on any political question the state faces. Please welcome the Honorable Toni Harp. Also with us, the Honorable Lawrence F. Haygood, Jr., Mayor of Tuskegee, Alabama. Elected in 2016, Mayor Haygood also served as the Economic Business Development Specialist at the Tuskegee-Macon County Community Development Corporation for the past 6 years. Please welcome the Honorable Mayor Haygood to the panel. And finally, Dr. Bernard E. Anderson. He is the Whitney M. Young Jr. Professor Emeritus at the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania. We should also note that Dr. Anderson is the first tenured professor there, and that is quite an accomplishment. He is also a member of the American Economic Association and founder and past president of the National Economic Association. Please welcome him and all of them collectively. Please have a seat. Let me start. We've been talking about this. Some of you I talked to yesterday, and we've been talking about this for the last couple of hours. One of the things I just want to throw out, and anyone brave enough to take it first should take a stab at this. I'm from Detroit. We just commemorated the 50th anniversary of the 1967 riots. There'll be a movie that is heading to theaters called Detroit, which really speaks to the issues that started that riot, that really knocked the city out for the last quarter or a half century. Some of the same issues that we saw in Detroit in 1967, we are still grappling with, particularly in the African American community today. How do we make sure that this Marshall Plan becomes effective so in the next 50 years, we're not grappling with these same issues? Anyway.
Well, as I recognize, the Marshall Plan has laid out a well-thought-out plan about how we can make progress within our community. I think one of the key challenges we will have and opportunities we have is to set up some kind of measures to determine where we are at this time, what kind of progress do we expect as we go forward. For instance, when we come here next year, what kind of progress have we made in terms of health? What kind of progress have we made in terms of our infrastructure, in terms of education? We've got to set some benchmarks. Therefore, we'll know that we're making a steady progress and not just dealing with issues in a circular way. We make some progress, but then we seem to step back. So I think we've got to set some levels and benchmarks that we expect to achieve, some in the very near term, because those are issues that you have to deal with in terms of survival and your day-to-day living. Then the short term, over the next year or two, and then eventually a long-term, well-thought-out plan, which the Marshall Plan gives us, a comprehensive plan about how we can move forward.
And I think that's the other aspect of it, Ed, is that it's comprehensive. It deals not only with jobs and the economy, but it also addresses education, it addresses criminal justice, it addresses all of the barriers that we have historically seen. It addresses health. And so to the extent that we can take a multifaceted approach to the challenges that we face in our communities, I think it has the potential to be very successful.
Let me ask you, before we get to, let me ask you, Mayor, in looking at Gary, Indiana is a lot like Detroit, a booming town for many, many years when the auto industry and the steel industry was big and it was part of America's muscle, and then it fell on hard times and really has been slipping to try to kind of gain that foundation ever since. How optimistic are you that we can collectively find and institute some of the Marshall Plan, particularly when we look at the political landscape we're facing right now?
So I'm very optimistic, and I'll tell you why. I don't depend on Washington or the State House. it's not that I reject the help or that I'm not looking for the help, but we understand that there are things that we can do in our own community to support small businesses. There are things that we can do in our own community to take advantage of job creation for local residents. There are things that we can do, such as banning the box, that we can do to deal with some of the criminal justice challenges that we face, and that the bully pulpit that we have as mayors really does give us the opportunity to do some things in addition to what is happening in Washington and for us, Indianapolis.
Ed, I'd like to comment on the first question you asked about Detroit, and that is to say that the mainstream Marshall Plan is a set of policies that are intended to deal with the root cause of the problems in Detroit and in Gary and in many other cities across this country, and that is racial inequality in American economic life. It is broad, it is deep, and it is persistent. And what we have to understand is that the mainstream Marshall Plan is a set of policies that we know will work. We know that because they have worked before. They're policies that are intended to increase employment, to deal with infrastructure problems, to deal with the accumulation and acquisition and preservation of wealth. If those policies are implemented, I guarantee you, and I don't make predictions before 5, but I guarantee you that if the comprehensive set of policies that are proven policies included in the mainstream Marshall Plan are implemented, it will have a significant effect in narrowing racial inequality in employment, income, and wealth in this country.
I think it's important as well for cities to know what it is they bring to the overall economy of their counties, of their regional areas, that when cities thrive, the other areas thrive as well. And so that's something that we bring to the table. That's something that I think people are beginning to understand. And I absolutely agree that we can't wait on Washington or our states or any other form of government for cities to move forward with these ideas. We know that they work, and we know that there are other ways. There are public-private partnerships that can help with some of these things, to get the resources to do some of these things. But we've just got to get started. And when we get started and when we're successful, it makes all the difference in the world, and it shows that the plan absolutely works.
Is there a need to divorce race from this? A lot of times race is implied in what is needed for particularly urban areas, and then you may get the pushback that you see often, particularly again from the far right. Is there a need, if these plans are to work, to try to eradicate race from the first portion of bringing it in?
Well, I think it is nonsense to eradicate race and to not talk about this. This is a racial issue. Let me go back and say this. We're talking about racial inequality in American economic life. I don't want to take the time, and you have advised me not to get deep into the statistics. I'm an economist. We thrive on statistics. But I can refer the audience to many, many studies that I've written and others have written, but that's beside the point. But is this a racial issue? It's because of the economic position that African Americans are in this country, and we want to change that. We want to eliminate racial inequality in American economic life. And the point that must be made time and again is that these are proven policies. There's no question about the fact that these policies will work. They need to be adopted. They need to be adopted now. We need to get on with solving this problem that has lasted far too long in this country with respect to the economic and social position of African Americans.
Can I just say
Yep.
one thing, though? I think that for most urban areas in America are now majority minority communities. And all of the surrounding communities depend upon those urban areas. And so, yes, it's about race, but it's also about where we as a people have been pushed, where we live, and what it is that we own in many respects politically by being in that place, and why that place is so critical to the rest of the surrounding area.
Mayor Haygood, what do you find as the biggest stumbling blocks when you look to implement things that are in the Marshall Plan? What do you find as your biggest hurdle?
The biggest hurdle, as I see it, centers around our will, the energy we need to have those policies implemented. They are policies that come from a racial background, and that's why we're not getting the strength behind them. It's going to take a voting power that shows that we have the power to make those changes, that will cause people to listen to us. It's a challenge for us to put more energy behind it, because if those policies are not implemented, it's because people aren't respecting us. And they'll respect us more as we galvanize support for the plan itself. We have to make a commitment. As was said by one of our speakers yesterday, yes, we've done a lot, but we've got a lot more to do. I agree with the other mayors. It's a lot about what we do within our own community. We need the support of the federal government. We need the support of the state government, definitely. But it's a lot we can do within our own community in terms of supporting ourselves. But more importantly, we've got to come together to take the power that we have to make sure that these policies get implemented.
Let me make another point about this. This point needs to be made. The beneficiaries of implementing the mainstream Marshall Plan will not only be African Americans.
That's absolutely correct.
If we implement these programs, eliminate, reduce significantly inequality in income, it will accelerate the rate of economic growth in this country. We're now coming out of the recession of 2007, 2009. I will say a little bit about economics. I'm an economist after all. And in fact, we have had a slow growth recovery. The recovery has been on average less than 2%. If we eliminated inequality in the distribution of income, which the mainstream Marshall Plan policies would do, we could raise the rate of economic growth, real growth in GDP, above 3% per year. How could we do that? By increasing the income of people who are in low income. We increase demand, we increase their spending, we increase production so that goods and services will be produced. We will accelerate the rate of economic growth if we eliminate the disparities.
Mayor Freeman Wilson, let me play citizen. I'm in Gary, and I say to you, you know, I've been trying to grow my small business. I've heard of economic zones. I've heard of small business loans. I've heard of X. I've heard of Y. I've heard of Z. I've been promised this for 20 years, and I can't get off the mat. Why should I believe it this time?
Well, because we've made a concerted effort in our city to incubate small businesses, to direct them to capital, to create policies that when larger businesses are either expanding or growing. As an example, we've had a hospital recently invest $30 million. The same hospital is talking about building a new facility. Part and parcel of our conversation with them from the beginning, and this is a private entity, is to say, will you hire local businesses in addition to the local residents? Because that makes a difference.
When you think about, for instance, the WPA and FDR, when he looked across America and said the infrastructure needs work, Americans need work, let us do this as a collective effort and everybody wins. I don't know that we have, well, I don't even want to say I don't know, we do not have that kind of vision or visionary in the White House. How do we look for a bigger gain, or should we look for a bigger gain for the masses?
I think the first thing really is education, and while many mayors don't have direct input into education, they have influence on education. And what we've really got to do is to make sure that the people who live in our communities, people of color, are prepared for the world that they live in today, which is very different than the world that I had to prepare for. And we've got to demand that our public education system educate our young people so that they can thrive in that world, and that the infrastructure that we need as a community, 1 gigabit service, that type of thing, is available so that we eradicate the digital divide.
So how do we do that when we have a president who, so here are your numbers, Dr. Anderson, a president who's going to cut hundreds of millions of dollars, some argue billions of dollars, from the Department of Education, but then donate a portion of his salary, $100,000, to that same department. How are we going to make sure that in a world that is becoming increasingly dependent on education, how do we make sure that our community shares in that? Because we are seeing school systems still to this day fall by the wayside in many, many urban areas.
I think that you really can't concede the cuts. That's what this organization and every other organization that understands the importance not just of education funding, of transportation funding, of community development block grant funding and HUD funding. This is the first time an administration has cut across the board in a way that has impacted urban, rural, you name it. And so that's when we have to go, because this is just a proposal,
Right.
that budget.
Right.
That's where we come in to talk to our members of Congress to say that's not acceptable.
14% he wants out of that budget.
Yes.
Yeah, I think an indication of it was what happened yesterday when he came out with the transgender thing against the military. One of the interviewees on CNN simply said, we have got to put out our strongest effort in terms of what we have, that is our power. And they recognize that their power is the power of the vote. And that's what we have to do. As Mayor was saying, we go to the people who are affected by our votes, but we first must start internally and get more people out. We have a good group here, we generally have a good group, but we have a need to reach back to get many more involved. That's when the plans will be adopted. The Marshall Plan will be adopted. The policies of the Marshall Plan will be adopted. But we have to have the will to have a stronger voice so that people hear us and understand that we're serious. In many states, in many districts, it was just a few votes that could have turned around who represented that district. You saw the president just today, he's talking about 50 and 51. Just think if we had 1 or 2 more who were in a more progressive era. That's work, but that's the work that we've got to be willing to do so that we can adopt these policies that affect the whole country, but particularly our community, and will put us in a much better position as we go forward.
Just hold on for me 1 second. I'm going to ask those of you who do have questions to just start to make your way to the microphone, and we'll start to take those in just a moment. Go ahead.
I want to add that we should not rely entirely upon the federal government to implement the measures included in the mainstream Marshall Plan. There are some policies that can be developed at the state and local level that can contribute to achieving the goals, and let me give you one. The most efficient measure for reducing poverty is not increasing the minimum wage, but increasing the value and broadening the eligibility for the Earned Income Tax Credit. We demonstrated that in the Clinton administration, that I am very proud to say I was a part of as Assistant Secretary of Labor, working with Bob Reich and Alexis Herman, the first African-American Secretary of Labor. But let me get on to the point here. The state and local governments can sell bonds in order to raise funds in a bond issue to support a local or state earned income tax credit that can be targeted to the people we're talking about. Why not consider that? If the state or the local community, the municipality, has a favorable investment grade rating, they can sell bonds to raise the money to implement a local earned income tax credit that can be tied to the federal earned income tax credit. We need to think creatively about the implementation of these policies. Don't rely completely upon the federal government in order to implement this plan.
Mayor Hart?
I was going to say that in fact we do have some tools, but I also wanted to say that we need to resist this administration, and that we have got to understand that there's a balance of powers. You have the executive branch, you have the legislative branch, and you have the judicial. And if the executive branch operates in what I would consider to be opposition to really our Constitution, in many respects that's what they're doing with their proposals, then we've got to take it to Congress, and if that doesn't work, we've got to go to the courts.
And I just also wanted to add about the EITC. We partnered with our local Urban League chapter, the Urban League of Northwest Indiana, to raise and increase the number of people who claim the EITC, but not just to put more money in their pockets, but to also help them to be thoughtful with the way that they spend that money. You know, what are you going to do? How much are you going to save? How much are you going to invest in your children's education? What are some other opportunities that you can do? And will you spend that in the city of Gary as opposed to other communities? So there's a real opportunity with EITC.
Quickly.
To speak to about the state's bonding, the challenge we have in Alabama, for instance, again, goes back to priorities. They want to have the largest bond ever in the state of Alabama to build mega prisons, 4 mega prisons. Now, cutting the money that goes to programs for rehabilitation or programs to prevent people from going to prison in the first place. That's the challenge that we have. See, we have that tool, which you're very right about, but it's not being properly used because we're not bringing the pressure to bear on our legislators and other local officials to address those needs of our community that affects everybody. Instead of building prisons, support the programs. Instead of building a wall, why not build bridges that will give jobs in the community? Instead of supporting tax breaks for the rich, why not support lunches in schools for children to maintain it, and the lunches for the elderly at home who have worked all these years for our country? We've got to get our priorities straight, and it takes us pushing those priorities in a very strong way. We can't be passive about it. We've got to step up to the plate.
So let me do this, and I'm going to go to the audience for the question, but I'm going to have you marinate on this. That's all well and good, but the real question is, how do we do that? Because the truth...
Organize.
Okay, but I'm going to get to that specifically because Mayor Haygood and I were talking for about an hour upstairs, and the truth of the matter is we've been saying this for a long time, and we've not seen it move to fruition to this point on a large level. So I want to talk about how we can do some of that. Yes, sir.
Reverend Mark Penman Perez with Youth Corp International and Penman World from New Orleans, Houston, and D.C., candidate for U.S. Senator for Tuskegee, Alabama. How can we engage in active conversation with the street youth to work with them as youth leaders to stay positive, and instead of just rap music, what about rap Matt, rap history, rap Brown, and bring things full circle? We have started a veterans owned entrepreneurial network in D.C., opening D.C. Dream Center August 23rd, to open doors for a new discussion of righting the wrongs of society with human rights preserved for civil rights approved through more with STEM programs instead of just athletic programs, to more academic, electronic, connected global neighborhood networks. Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. So it's a fair question, and again, a question that's been raised for a long time, quite frankly. How do we move forward and get engaged in beyond the stereotypical fields that we tend to go into?
One of the things that's happening in our community, our youth are engaged. They're actually leading revitalization in our community. Not only are we meeting with them, we have gone to every level to get youth who can talk to youth. That's the challenge. Sometimes we don't realize we're not speaking the same language, so we have to go to those youth organizations to get them involved with other youth. And they have not only started coming to our meetings on a regular basis to give input, we have them on the agenda, they're actually leading organizations. They're buying property in the community. I'm talking about people who just graduated from college, Young man bought 2 houses. This is something totally different for our community because they're not just talking, they're acting. When they started acting, other youth who graduated this year bought properties and now are investing in businesses there. And we're supporting them with entrepreneurial programs like you are and talking with our local banks about supporting them. So as we reach out to talk to them directly and listen to them, then we get response and reaction, and that starts to move the plan forward. We've got to get it moving with action, as you said, and then measure where are we going and sustain that activity.
We're also opening the door for our young people to explore careers in environmentally conscious businesses, whether it's a waste to energy business, whether it's urban farming, which can in and of itself be a business. Also to look at the remediation of different types of asbestos and things as you look at deconstruction and other areas in the community. So there are a lot of new fields that you can direct young people in as well.
Okay. Yes.
Hi there, my name is Lynn, and I am a Grand Rapids, Michigan Urban Leaguer. My question really is about the how. And when you open up the Marshall Plan, you see numbers like 40 million, and then you start to add and add and add and add, and all of a sudden you get a little bit nervous because on a local level you think, how can I possibly impact that? Is there a way that we can showcase the stories that you're talking about on a local level to give us all a tidbit or a golden nugget to be able to take home every day? And maybe that is through tweets, or maybe that is through, the technology that we have. Is there something that we can grab those stories and run? Because it sounds to me like every local organization is, but then all of a sudden it gets bigger and bigger and you just stop.
Let me take a crack at that. One of the things I do for Mark as his senior economic advisor is conduct an annual study of the economic impact of the National Urban League. Mark has asked me to report on that to the affiliates at a meeting that you have scheduled, I think, in September at some time in New Orleans. So I'll give you the details of that. But you have to understand that much of what the Urban League does through its workforce development programs, its housing, and especially its business development programs, improve the income of those who are served, and it makes a contribution to those communities. Let me give you an example of this. There is a primary and a second, I won't get too deep in the weeds with this. There is a primary and a secondary economic impact of the National Urban League, what the National Urban League does. In 2016, the Entrepreneurial Development Centers, there are 13 of them across the country, provided business organization, business operation assistance to their participants. And the businesses that were owned by participants produced annual revenues of $575 million. That means that if you look at the different communities in which those entrepreneurial development centers are located, that was increase in income and wealth for the business owners and increase in spending in those communities. So if you can demonstrate, as I think you can with the data that are available, that the work that the National Urban League does contributes to the local economies, you can then demonstrate and make the case that the Urban League and the work that it does is worthy of increased support. Economics, ladies and gentlemen, is all about the numbers. And when you hear these large numbers, you're talking about the nation as a whole. Break it down to your community, and you can see the impact that the work you do has on the local economies. So don't be dissuaded by these big numbers. Yeah, you talk about billions and trillions. Every now and then you talk about that's a lot of money. But when you break it down, you can see the practical impact of that.
Right, but the question becomes, I think is what she was asking, is how do you find the practicality of that one thing that moves forward for you?
There
that
is
you
no
see
one
it?
thing that moves forward.
But I think that it really does come in policy change. You know, you can do a program, you can support a new business coming to your city, but when you look at policies, how do you handle those businesses that are funded or those projects that are funded with public dollars? Is there a requirement for local employment? Is there a requirement for local businesses to get involved? Are there other policies that you can implement and encourage others to do the same that would in fact have an impact on a much more macro level?
Yes.
Since the 1960s, New Haven has had a set-aside program. It's, for one reason or another, it hasn't been challenged. We make sure that every single contract that we have in the city has minority participation on it. We also make sure that for those businesses that are too small to participate at a higher level, that we set aside a certain amount of those contracts for those businesses. And it's made a huge difference in building the business economy. There are some folks who want to go into business that don't have the skills. And so we have a business academy for those folks, and it helps them build the skills so that they can use the resources that are there and begin to build their businesses and impact our economy.
All right, let me get some questions in here. Yes.
My name is Simone Lightfoot, National Director of Urban Initiatives for the National Wildlife Federation. And to Mayor Freeman, thank you so much. What you've done in Gary, Indiana for years, since you've been there with your green office and Mary Mulligan, has been phenomenal. Can you touch on what mayors across cities could do far more deliberately to make sure that conservation, sustainability, and green, something we've done culturally all our lives, is really where Black people, brown people, urban folk are? Talk to what mayors could do more of, city councils could do more of, as it relates to conservation and sustainability. Thank you so much.
First, let me thank you. I really have to be honest, everything that I know is attributable to Brenda Scott Henry as it relates to urban, the environmental piece, but it's so important, and it's especially important now that we have seen our president remove himself from the Paris Climate Accord. But, you know, I think the first thing that we did as a community was just to look at how we disposed of our waste, particularly our solid waste, our recyclables, things like that, and to say we want to not only monetize our waste, but look at material recovery facilities. Look at those businesses that can convert that waste into energy in a way. Look at places that will recycle tires so that we can, in fact, not only develop a stream of revenue, but also preserve our environment. In addition to that, we found it important to teach our children about that because historically, that has not been emphasized. You know, we talk about recycling, but we don't really teach it or emphasize it. We talk about the fact that there are greenhouse emissions and things like that, but people don't really know what they are. I know I didn't know about it until I became mayor. And so to really emphasize those things and then to bring it home, why does this matter to you? And I think that's really what we as mayors have been trying to do.
Yes.
Good afternoon. I'm Kimberly Adams. I'm a reporter with the public radio program Marketplace. Dr. Anderson, you mentioned that reducing income inequality could promote economic growth by about 3%, which is right in line with where the administration says they need to have economic growth in order to achieve some of their objectives. So first of all, how much does income inequality need to be reduced in order to achieve that growth? And has the Urban League been in any communication with the administration to pursue reducing income inequality as a process for increasing economic growth?
No, you have me at a disadvantage. That's a very technical question. And let me take a strike at it. First of all, I did not say increase it by 3%. I said increase the rate of growth to above 3%. It's now around 2.7, 2.5 to 2.7%. We can get it above 3% to maybe 3.4 to 3.5% over an extended period of time if we implement the various policies that equalize income, that they narrow the income disparities. Now, how much is required to do that is difficult to say. We'd have to run a regression analysis. I don't want to get technical about this. What is important is to understand the principle that is involved here. Understand the principle that is involved here. Understand that income inequality, by diminishing the capacity of certain groups to spend money, limits the rate of economic growth. Economic growth is all about spending. If you don't have the money, you can't spend the money. If you have more money, you will spend more. If you spend more, this is fundamental economic, macroeconomic. If you have more, you spend more, the economy will grow faster, and the quality of life of all of those spending the money will improve. That is the principle here. And I can refer you to some studies from the National Bureau of Economic Research that will answer your question in some. So see me after the meeting, and I'll give you the source of the reference to the source of data on this.
I think one of the key things to remember, Dr. Anderson is talking about spending where we have more citizens spending money, more consumers, as compared to the money being put in other areas away from consumers who do not spend. Investment and lack of spending occurs when we invest in other areas that may not necessarily be about consumables. And at some point, I don't care how much you invest, if we're not having spending going on and recycling in terms of those dollars, then we run into challenges. And those spending that we have by consumers also create jobs. So I think exactly right on that. It's about redirecting that activity, the priorities, so it affects the entire economy, therefore affecting us as a people and the large economy.
I'll go to this young lady. You have a question?
Hello, my name is Mishana Poe. I'm with the Urban League of Portland Workforce Department. Where we live, we are about 3-4% Black people there. Our city, we have done audits, we have data, we have grants to help people to put in place these changes, but everything's locked down by gatekeeping and relationships. How do we break down those gatekeepers so that we can really make change, even if we have to push back on the grants that they give us and say it's not enough, we need to change this so that we can serve our community? How could we strategize around that and push back on that?
Can I just say something about that very quickly, and then anybody who wants to panel? I think that all of us have to do a couple of things here, even if this urban plan, this Marshall Plan is going to work. A, you've got to convince yourself that there are things that you can do that can affect change. We don't often necessarily believe that. There are a lot of complaints that we have, there's some belly aching that we do because we've heard it for so long. I think first you have to believe, and then you have to find committed people who are willing to do just as you said. To say, you know what, that's not enough, I'll pass on it. Because at some level, you don't ever want to pass on the money, the opportunity, and the like. And so really you have to have, and that group will be small. Trust that. Because when people talk about taking money off the table, all of that changes after a while. Okay, so I would tell you just on a personal side that if you are one, you may get 2 or 3 to follow. And if you can get that 2 or 3, the effect of change will happen when they see it working.
And also to that point, most public meetings have a public comment section. So go to those meetings where the decision makers are and make your comment, but also use the research and the data that you've already developed to say, this is why we need more for this initiative, because what you suggested is not enough. So I think it's also important to shed a public light on it.
And find out who your partners may be. It's very important that we understand we're going to have to form more coalitions. It's not just about things that affect us. They affect most other people, but they don't understand unless we reach out. We've got to get a little beyond our areas of comfort to reach out to others who will be impacted by these policies and realize that that gives us more clout when we go to others, because they can contact some people that we can't. So try to reach out where you can, if you can, and when you can, to others who can join in your effort. Join in theirs if it's not something you're totally against. Therefore, you bring in more partners.
And I would tell you to use a template of a group that you would think, oh no, I'll never follow them. But look at what the Tea Party did. The Tea Party was a very small group of people initially. And the political change they wrought over the last 8 years has been tremendous. And so it doesn't take just throngs of people to make real change. They just have to be active. And so I would suggest, really taking a look at that. This, I'm told, okay, now they're changing. We have last 2 questions. So the young lady, I think they sat down, can probably come back up. Yes, sir.
Richard Lee Snow, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I just need marching orders. Can you give me 2 to 3 things I should do?
So can I save that for last, because that's what I was
so we're on
gonna
the
ask
same
them
page
to
then.
do. Yeah, absolutely. Because that's I think at the end of the day, if you don't get those, why bother, right? Yes, ma'am. So I will have each one of them give. Yep. Yes.
Hello, my name is Cheryl Milton Roberts, and
Hey, Cheryl.
Hey, how are you? I don't know why I get that reaction from people. I'm from St. Louis, Missouri. I work for the Missouri Department of Transportation. But my question is really coming more from the standpoint of someone who stood on the ground in Ferguson. And that is, we seem to have built 2 communities. And we have this community of people who are represented so beautifully here, who feel comfortable walking within this space. And we have this other community that isn't here, that needs to be here because they need to be in that job fair, okay? And my question really is, how do we, all of us sitting in here, make this space and those opportunities more visible and more welcoming to those other folks? Because there's some brilliant people out there, but they don't feel comfortable coming in here. And so in order for the Marshall Plan to work, we've got to get everybody working.
Thanks, Cheryl.
So part of that is those of us who walk in places like this can't just walk here.
Right.
We have to go to where the folks who need to be at the job fair and who need our help are. Right. And talk in a way that is, that resonates with them.
Exactly.
And don't just talk and say, this is what I'm going to do for you. We were meeting for about 4 months around a table in Gary about a job center that we wanted to create. And one day at one of the meetings, I said, wait a minute, I'm looking around this table and we all have jobs. Let's get somebody at this table who doesn't have a job so that we can understand, one, what the barriers are, what the needs are, what training they'd like to be engaged in. We spend a lot of time meeting about folks without engaging them.
Exactly. Okay. I agree.
So let me do this. Let me start my left to far right in just what was suggested there. Just a couple of very quick marching orders, because I think when people come to these kinds of town halls and meetings, they want to be able to go with something concrete to go home with. So, Dr. Anderson, I'll start with you. People are looking for some type of marching order, something they can take away, a nugget, if you will.
Let me say this, and I'm speaking to urban leaguers. There's a couple of things that you must do. First of all, read and absorb the mainstream Marshall Plan. Understand what it is saying. And know that it will work if it's implemented. The second thing is to do what, who was the black leader? Frederick Douglass, I think it was, that you must agitate. Don't sit back and just know that things can get better if you do that. Be involved in your community, in the Urban League, but not only in the Urban League, but with other organizations that are working to affect change. We've got to get action behind change and getting these policies implemented. Be in touch with your senator, your congressperson, your local city councilman, your mayors, and so forth. Agitate around these policies. Understand the policies, know that they will work, agitate to get them implemented in your community.
I would say the key thing is to look at where we are now and where we want to be next year, in the near term, 2 or 3 years from now, and then in the long term. Take that plan and let's see how we can put some target dates to it. The first thing we can do, and I think the most important thing we can do, 2018 is next year, and it's right upon us. See, if we don't make some changes, we'll be talking about the plan still. In order for policies to change, we've got to get our numbers out, because the change occurred whether we like it or not by what they did. Change occurred because what we did not do. We didn't get out strong enough. In a few areas, they determined that if we go to these rural areas, if we go to this pocket of people, we go to this pocket of people, and it added up, and it made a shocking change and just knocked out some political predictions. So right now, we've got to decide if we have the will to get our numbers up to really do what we need to do. We've done it before. We've got to decide that we have the will to make those changes. Then we can vote those policies in. People respect those numbers. People respect our dollars, and they respect our numbers in the voting booth. And that's the most critical thing we can do right now. Look at 2018 coming around the corner, pull the Marshall Plan out, make people commit to it, but also commit ourselves to the work that needs to be done to change those numbers next year. If you change 1 or 2 districts, I guarantee we'll start seeing a change in policies.
I think that you should look at the plan, choose 3 things in that plan that are doable in your community, build a coalition, and begin to get them done. Don't be limited by the fact that there may not be federal money. Don't be limited by the fact that there may not be state money. There are other monies. The other thing, I believe that we're really too dependent, frankly, as communities on all of these things. Every single year, the state does infrastructure development throughout our country. Every single year, municipalities do infrastructure development. Well, where are our communities? What have we demanded that we partake of in terms of those things? We haven't done that, and we can. If food is an issue in your city and you want to take that on, develop a coalition to deal with food. Find ways to raise money. Join others who care about food as well and get people fed. They're doing it across the country without federal money. It helps to have a SNAP program, absolutely. But a lot of the things that are in this plan you can do today, if you believe that you can do it and you build the coalitions to get it done. There are foundations. People can give money. People give hundreds of thousands of dollars to political campaigns. They can give that to the things that will build our communities as well, if we ask them, if we believe that it can be done. But you've got to start with deciding where you're going to start, and you've got to believe that you can get to that point.
You know, one of the greatest opportunities that have come out of the last election is the fact that coalitions have become so important in our communities. And so if you are an Urban League affiliate and are not working closely with City Hall, with the Commissioner's Office, with your state legislators, and also with your faith community, this is a big opportunity. We have a wonderful working relationship with Dr. Vanessa Allen and the Northwest Indiana Urban League. In fact, we raised the issue of race and policing in a community conversation that's won 2 awards. But the second thing that I would say, you know, all of us get notes from advocacy organizations saying, write your congressman, write your senator, and we never do it. I know I've not done it in the past. If you've never done it before, this is the time to just send an email, send a note, pick your issue. They're cutting everything. You need to stand up and be counted, because it's going to matter as Congress makes those decisions.
I would also make this suggestion to you as you look at the day-to-day from this administration and this White House. There is a tenuous political environment that we are in right now. Republicans are afraid of what's to come out next from this White House, whether they're saying it out loud or not. And so now is the time to really shore yourself up politically, and I would suggest that one of the ways is to back those public officials who you have contact with, and to make sure that they are listening to what you're saying. There are going to be a lot of frightened people when election time comes around, and so now would be the time to flex that muscle. We want to thank the Allstate Insurance Company for sponsoring this plenary. If you'll give them a round of applause. The Urban League appreciates your feedback and asks you to complete a survey regarding this session. The team sponsors value and will incorporate your input for next year's conference. They want you to complete the survey. Your name will be entered into a raffle for a chance to attend next year's National Urban League Conference for free. That'll increase those numbers, won't it, Doc? You can complete the Urban League Conference survey on their app or via the paper survey the staff will have at the door. Just two more housekeeping items. New this year, the Professional Thursdays, the ultimate after-work mixer in the Expo Hall from 5 to 7 p.m. this evening. That's from 5 to 7 in the Expo Hall, a great opportunity to network. Then be sure to catch the premiere of entertainment for the conference, Urban League Live Old School Hip Hop Conference. Some of y'all need to skip that. I ain't gonna say who. 8:30 a.m. tomorrow morning. Join them in the theater for the plenary session, 3 Ferguson, From Anger to Action. And then, if you will, be sure to tag all of your social medias with the hashtag Save Our Cities and let everyone know about your conference experience. We thank you all. Enjoy the rest of your evening.